Welcome. Welcome to the Halloween special. That's right, That's right. The Halloween special is live. And we're going to do something a little bit different tonight, folks. Not gaming tonight, not doing any of that. We're just going to have a discussion. We're going to talk about spooky things. We're going to talk about scary stories. We're going to talk about scary games. We're going to do a little bit of that as well. But what we are going to do is have a good time. That is guaranteed, my friends. So once again, I'd like to welcome everybody to the MAGG Show's Halloween special. And this evening, once again, we're not going to be playing games because, let's face it, I got a party going on. Very soon, by the way, I'd like to add. Very soon. So, what we are going to do is we're going to talk about spooky stuff. Again, scary stories. But before we get into any of that, let's start with some cool news that came out today. In case you didn't, of course, watch the videos that I dropped earlier today, we talked about Silent Hill 2 is coming to the Xbox consoles. That is correct. Xbox consoles coming out very soon. So, that's exciting news. It's great. The ESRB dropped a rating this morning on the website, rating Silent Hill 2 for Xbox. Now, when is it coming? We have no idea. We don't know. We don't know. But we'll find out. We're going to find out very soon. I would imagine maybe at the Game Awards we should hear something about that, and then maybe they'll release it sometime in the new year. Not 100% sure. However, the fact that it's rated means it could be coming out as soon as, like, maybe next month, maybe December. Something like that. So that's fantastic news. That was great to hear. Speaking of spooky, we also got our first actual official talk about Resident Evil Requiem in terms of the pre-orders of the game. You can actually purchase it right now. They have the special editions out right now. Right? So those are available now to purchase. Some of them are ridiculous. I saw them, some of them were like $300 or $500, whatever the hell it was. And I'm like, listen, man, I love Resident Evil just as much as the next guy, but like, let's get serious. $500? Like, are we kidding right now? You know what I mean? But anyways, what I want to do here, something a little bit different. I want to tell you guys a story. These are true stories, by the way. And whether you believe in this stuff or not, I'm not 100% sure. But you're just going to have to make up your own mind. I had situations that happened to me. Situations that were terrifying in so many different ways. And one of those things that happened to me, let me give you a little backstory. So where I used to live in my old house, we lived in a neighborhood, and I know it sounds very cliche. It was basically what they used to call in the 80s an Indian burial ground, which of course now they call indigenous burial ground. So it was an indigenous burial ground, and it was literally the entire neighborhood. And everybody used to go to the local bar, Archibald's, and we used to always sit there and talk and whatever. And eventually it got to the point where everybody started talking about ghost stories. And the reason why they started talking about ghost stories is that everything seemed to happen to different people. There was always a different story, different house, different situation, but there was always something going on in the neighborhood, and everybody had something to say about it, and it was pretty damn terrifying. So what ended up happening is I used to have these dreams. I used to sleep in my bed, which is on the left side of the top of the floor. My brother's room was behind me, and my baby brother's room was across the hall. Right across from there was the guest room. And night after night after night, I used to have these dreams, horrible dreams, that in my brother's room and in the guest room, which were connected, that the devil was in that room. I know it sounds a little bit extreme, but I'm going to tell you this anyway. So I always had this feeling that the devil was in that room. Anyhow, never told anybody because I figured everybody would think I was nuts, right? And I was a teenager at that time. getting into my late teens, like 18, 19 years old, somewhere around there. Never told a damn soul. Anyways, my baby brother, when he was a baby, he's no longer a baby now, but when he was a baby then, you know how kids are. They get up in the middle of the night, they leave their bedroom, and then they would go into their parents' bedroom and sneak into their bed and that kind of thing, right? Well, that used to happen quite often, and so my brother got up one night and he went into my parents' bed, got into bed, and my dad got pissed off, and my dad's like, you know what? I've had enough of this. I got to go to work tomorrow. I got a lot of stuff going on. I don't have time for this nonsense. So what did he do? He got up and he went to go sleep in my brother's bedroom to go get, well, at least attempt to get a good night's sleep. Well, here's where it gets crazy. I get down the next morning, and my dad looks like my dad's a doctor, by the way. He's a pharmacist and a doctor. Okay, so he's not like some crackpot wacko like in the streets with a sign saying, you know, the end is nigh, anything like that. And he's sitting there at the kitchen table, and he looks completely terrified. And I'm like, Dad, you okay? What's going on? Like, he looked like hell. I thought he was maybe getting sick or something. I don't know. Whatever it was. And my dad said, I didn't sleep last night. And I'm like, my mother's like, well, what happened? And he said, I had these horrible nightmares that there was an apparition of the devil standing in front of the bed. I never told a damn soul that story. Not one. Not one person. So that was one incident. Now, another thing that happened in the house, my dad, when he was 40 years old and above, he started playing the cello. He liked playing the cello. But, of course, because he had to work so much and whatever else, he used to play the cello in the middle of the night. So what ended up happening is that in the middle of the night, a lot of times he would go to the basement, bring his cello downstairs and his music stand and his music and everything else, close the basement door, and he would go play down there, and he would go practice down there so that he wouldn't disturb the rest of the house, myself, my brothers, and my mom, who were all sleeping or whatever, and he'd be down there playing the cello. So this one night, my mother gets up, middle of the night. So now this happened to a second person. So my mother gets up in the middle of the night, looks over to the side of the bed. My dad's not there. So what ended up happens is that she looks over, he's gone, but she hears the music. And all of a sudden she's like, God darn it, he's down there again. It's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. There he is, he's down there again. But lo and behold, what actually happened was she goes down. She goes down right to the basement door and she hears the music. She can hear, and she can tell you to this day, my mom is turning 70 this year. To this day, she could tell you exactly the piece of music that was playing. And so she had her ear to the door and she was listening. She goes, my God, why is he up so late? This and that, whatever. She opened the basement door, and the minute she opened the door, the music completely stopped. And then she goes down the stairs. She's calling his name. And he's calling his name. He's like, what are you doing down here? It's the middle of the night. You got to get to bed. You got to work tomorrow. She gets down there. He wasn't there. Not only was he not there, but the cello was standing up on the chair as if someone was just playing it. And not only that, the bow from the cello was sitting on the music stand. And the music that she heard, the sheet music was sitting right there on the music stand. She's now freaked out, as you can imagine, right? So what does she do? She goes upstairs. And my dad just walks back into the room like nothing happened. And then she goes, where the hell were you? And he goes, I was in the bathroom. Why? He was never downstairs the entire time. And to this day, she swears that she never, ever, ever forgot the name of that song that was playing. And he was never even down there. He was in the bathroom down the hall on the second floor of the house. He was nowhere near the basement. And she said she put her ear to it. She will swear to it till her grave. She goes, I put my ear to the door. I could tell you exactly the music that was playing. And when she got down there, the cello was not laying down on its side. It was standing up on the chair. And this has happened more than once. So that's another incident that happened. So now, another interesting thing happened. This happened actually not that long ago here. And then I'm going to tell you the freakiest story I've ever heard in my entire life. So this happened here now. This happened last year. I was in bed, middle of the night, having a dream, right? Just dreaming, doing my thing, whatever. And I'm sitting there, and I awaken this dream, so to speak, right? And I'm at a horse manger, which is right next to a lake. And there's two people at the lake. I couldn't recognize them, but there's two people standing at the lake, and they were both looking at me, and I'm standing in this manger of sorts or whatever, horse stall. You want to call it a horse stall, but it was open. And there was somebody standing next to me. And here's the freaky thing. And I'm only telling you guys this because, man, listen, I tell you this. It was some of the freakiest things that's ever happened to me. And I swear, and I'm not super religious, I can tell you that much. All right? But I'm telling you, that person standing next to me was Jesus Christ. And I'm looking him right in the face. And he spoke to me. And when he spoke, his voice was so, like, calming, but strong, assured of himself, that kind of thing, or whatever else, right? And I'm just looking at him, and I'm just looking at him perplexed, right? And then he takes something from his hand, and he's got, like, something in his hand. I couldn't see what it was. And it was like, I don't know, seeds or something like that, and he threw it on the ground. And as he threw it on the ground, these like bean sprouts and like flowers and all this stuff just started growing right before my eyes. Just kind of like a movie. It was crazy. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced. And then I looked at him and I said, this is like a miracle. And then he said to me, he said, I make all things new. And then when he touched my arm, he touched my left arm. When he touched my left arm, my wife woke up. It was the middle of the night, like 4 o'clock in the morning. My wife woke up and started shaking me and saying, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. What the fuck is happening? Excuse my language, but that's what she said. And I said, what happened? What happened? What happened? She goes, your whole body was convulsing and shaking like you were being electrocuted. The weird thing is that when he touched my arm, it felt like someone had just shocked me with like 100,000 volts of electricity, like from like a taser cannon or something. What's up, Cold Blood? How you doing, buddy? Shout out to Literal Table, by the way, for becoming a top-tier maggot brother. I truly appreciate that. Thank you. This is a very unusual live show that I'm doing right now. I'm only doing this as like a little bit of a thank you so much, Literal Table. Thank you for all the support, brother. I'm only doing this because I'm a storyteller, and I wanted to tell my stories about Halloween before I go off to explore my Halloween. So anyways, she says to me, your whole body was convulsing and shaking so badly that it woke me up. And then I'm like, what was I doing? And she goes, like, your arms, your legs, everything was shaking. It's like, almost like you were like, she goes, at one point I thought you were going to lift right off the damn bed. And we have a king size bed. So she was like 3 feet away from me. And for me to wake her up, and I didn't even know what happened. And it was the freakiest thing I think I've ever experienced. And powerful, because as soon as that hand touched me, it was crazy. So now, hold on, it gets crazier. About 6 days later, don't I have the same dream, same place, but I'm not standing at the horse manger this time, or whatever, horse stall you want to call it. Now I'm standing by the lake where those 2 other people were looking at me, and I still don't know who they were to this day. And I'm looking out at the water this time. So now I'm looking out at the water, and this is really crazy. This old Filipino man, maybe in his, like, well, not old. Let's say like 40s or 50s. It's hard to tell with Filipinos anyway. They could be 90 and they look 40. But either way, he was an older, like probably about my age, middle-aged Filipino guy. And he looking at me. So I look over at him. And then he started to speak. And you know what the crazy thing was? Is that the Filipinos man's voice was the same as JC himself, as Jesus Christ himself. It was the same voice, but a different face this time. So I looked at him and I smiled and I said, it's you. And then he smiled and he said, yes. And guess what happened? Woke up in the middle of the night. Same thing. My wife was freaking out. Your whole body was shaking yet again. No medical problems, no medical issues, nothing like that. But every time I came in contact in this dream, which I believe was Jesus. I'm not like I said, I'm not even religious or nothing. Not really. I don't like church. I'm not a big fan of church. I do believe in other stuff. I believe in higher power. I definitely. But for this to happen, it was the freakiest thing. I feel like I was touched by God. It was crazy. Same thing happened. So now a week goes by, another week, maybe a week and a half goes by. I wake up at around 3:30 in the morning, and I felt something. I felt something so dark and so sinister that it woke me right up, and I sat up in bed, and I looked around. There was nothing there. And I walked out of my bedroom into the hallway, and there was just a presence of blackness, and the worst blackness I've ever felt in my life, like the most evil thing. But there was nothing tangible in front of me. It was just a feeling that literally cut to my very soul. And I stared into that darkness, and I said, "Why are you here? Why are you here?" And then when I started getting pissed off, because then I'm at this point, I'm like, "Get out!" And I know this sounds crazy, because everybody's like, "Oh my God, Magg's a crackpot now." No, it wasn't like that. I was wide awake, completely like level-headed, normal situation, and I just said, "Why are you here?" And then I started to pray, funny enough. And I haven't done that in years. And I started to pray, and I said, "Get out of this house. You are not welcome here," this and that, whatever. And I started getting angry. And then there was a couple times my wife said in my sleep, I would kept saying, "Get out." I said, "I'd get out of my house, get out of my life, get out of here, this and that, whatever." I said, "You are not welcome here. This is not a house for you." And I don't know what else I said. And I remember one time I prayed. Anyways, you know what that thing did? That thing disappeared. Completely disappeared, and it was gone. And when it was gone, I could feel the difference. When that was gone, it was like, holy shit, something literally just left this house. It was the freakiest thing. I spoke to a minister about it. Two of them. One I told the story to. Oh, by the way, and that dark that evil entity, whatever the hell it was, came back one more time. And then and then apparently my wife said I was talking in my sleep, and she said that I wasn't welcome here. This is I with the power of Jesus and all this other stuff. I don't know what the hell I was saying. She said you were talking all kinds of like religious gibberish in your sleep, and this thing disappeared. Keep in mind, I'm a guy who's not considered religious, and this thing happened. That thing never came back. So I spoke to two people about it. I spoke to a minister about it, and I said, "What the fuck is going on?" And one of them was so scared. When I told the story, his face was as white as the sheet of paper here. When I told him the story. Because I told him like totally straight. I'm like, "Listen, man, this is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened, whatever." And I told him the story, and I looked at him. I'm like, "What do you think?" And then he's just staring at me like, holy shit, that was it. Like he was terrified. However, I spoke to another one. He's from the West Indies. He's actually from Trinidad. And I spoke to him about it too. And I asked him, I said, "What the hell is going on?" And then he put his hand right on my heart. And it was a weird thing too, man. He put his hand right on my heart, and he says, "You've been touched by God." And he says, "It doesn't happen often." And he goes, "But when it does, we celebrate it." And I go, "What about the other thing?" I go, I don't get, okay, fine. I was touched by God. Great. Wonderful. What about that other thing? And he said, "I know exactly what that is." He says, "The Dark Lord is pissed off because he wants to know who you are." He says he's curious. He wants to know why he chose you. And I said, I don't know. I said, "It's the craziest thing." I said, but there it is. And that's a true story right there, folks. That's a true story. It just happened last year. However, I got two more for you. And these are all true stories. These are all ones that happened to me and my family. Before y'all think I'm like completely crazy, but I'm telling you, this is a real thing. So another one happened. This is my uncle. My uncle is a Monsignor. If anybody's part of the Catholic Church, you would know that a Monsignor is one step. Hey, Iron Balls, how's it going, buddy? Lady Gamer, how are you? I'm telling ghost stories tonight. And these are not just ghost stories. These are actual stories that, like, literally things that have happened to me, my family, specifically. And some of them are so freaky. I said some of the ones from my house. I said the ones that happened to me personally, which were more like, I guess, religious-based. And then I got to tell you this one. My uncle is a Monsignor. If anybody knows anything about the Catholic Church, the Monsignor is one step below Cardinal, and Cardinal is one step below the Pope, because the Pope is a elected Cardinal, okay? So my uncle is very, very high up in the hierarchy, so to speak, of the Roman Catholic Church, and he has actually spent a lot of years living, believe it or not, living with the Pope in the Vatican. So my uncle's seen it all. He's been through all of it, whatever else, and you know, the funny thing is he even says to this day, when you ask him about stuff, first of all, he does not like talking about this story. One of my friends asked him and said, hey, I don't want to bother you, but can you tell me this story? The story. And he says, I don't like to tell this story. He goes, but I will tell you once, and don't ever ask me again about this story. You know what the crazy thing about my uncle is? He even says he's not 100% sure he believes in God. That's a fact. He said that. He said he's not 100% sure. So, what happens? He's in upstate New York. Okay, yes, we live in Canada, I understand that. But he also has family in Syracuse. And he's in upstate New York. And he's at a religious retreat. And he's there for 3 days. And they're doing their thing, whatever. I don't know, whatever the hell they do at religious retreats. Pray. Get drunk. I don't know. They're doing whatever they're doing. And he's there for 3 days. And 2 nuns come to him. Father Larry. I'll tell you his real name. Okay? For the sake of the story. And it actually is his real name. Father Larry, Father Larry, Father Larry. We need your help. We need your help. And they're freaking out. And he says, what's going on? And he's like, you need to come with us. And so he goes into this other part of the nunnery or whatever the hell it's called. And there's a girl, very stereotypical, because, you know, that's the kind of thing that happens in like movies and stuff, especially The Exorcist. And he goes, there's a girl on the bed and she's sitting there. And he says to me, he goes, she was as sweet as pie. Those are his exact words. He goes, sweet as pie. And just sitting there. And then he goes, what's the problem? And he says, there's something desperately wrong with this girl. And her family, I guess, brought her to them or this and that or whatever. And they're trying to work this out. So my uncle's like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, she's just sitting there. Like, it's like what's happening and this and that. And there's like, can you pray with us for her? So he started praying. So he went over to the edge of the bed and he started praying. When he started praying, he had his little vial, whatever the hell you want to call it, of holy water. Very much like the Exorcist film. And I asked him about that. I'm like, you know, this is starting to sound a lot like the movie The Exorcist. And he goes, I am telling you once, and I will never tell you again. This happened. And he goes, I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm like, all right, cool it, Uncle Larry. It's all good, buddy. Tell me the story. So he said, we were praying. When I started praying, and when I started getting to the edge of the bed and started praying, this girl started getting real nasty, started freaking out, started swearing, started saying all this other stuff, whatever else. Not a big deal. He's like, okay, well, schizophrenic, right? That would be your first instinct, schizophrenic. He says, when I put holy water on her, he goes, she screamed like I had dropped acid on her, and then started completely losing her mind mentally, and then her body physically started thrashing, whatever else. And then he left the room. He came back and spoke to her when she calmed down. And this time she wasn't speaking English anymore. She was not speaking Aramaic, she was speaking Latin. But she was speaking a dialect of Latin that hasn't been spoken in thousands of years. This girl was barely gone through puberty yet. Where the hell did she learn this language? So my uncle had contacted the Vatican because you have to do that, because there are, believe it or not, I know this, these are supposed to be ghost stories and stuff. There is a legality to these things because people have died during exorcisms and things like that, right? So he had to go through them. They had to look at the case, whatever else, and then they had to give their approval. There was nobody they could send to come deal with this. If you've seen the Russell Crowe movie, The Pope's Exorcist, you would know that man had performed 20,000 exorcisms all over the world, like on every continent on the planet, Africa, Europe, North America, South America, wherever, all over the world. Anyways, he wasn't anywhere near to be found, and neither was anybody else. So they're like, you're going to have to do this yourself. So my uncle told these two nuns and said, we're going to have to perform an exorcism, and you're going to have to help with me. So he walked in the room. He had his Bible. He had the whole thing, and he was all jazzed up, ready to go. Went into the room, and he made the two nuns go and kneel in front of the bed and just pray. Nothing else, just pray. And he started performing the exorcism. When he started reading the rites and everything else of exorcism and all that other stuff and everything that happened, he doesn't know 100% sure. He's not 100% sure. But he did say this one thing. He said, I swear on all that's holy, at one point, she lifted off the bed. He goes, I don't know if she levitated or because her body was thrashing and whatever else, and she was doing all these crazy things that it kind of gave the illusion that she lifted off the bed. He goes, but I'm telling you, when I looked, she was not touching the mattress. She was off the bed. And he successfully performed this exorcism. My uncle is now in his late 70s. He's very unwell. But after he told me that story, he literally, and this is years ago, he literally said to me, he says, do not ask me to tell you that story ever again for the rest of my life. That's what that incident that happened to him must have scared the shit out of him so bad that he never wanted to speak about it again. And no one asks him about it anymore. If he was looking for any kind of notoriety or anything else, he could have done a podcast. He could have made some money off of it. He could have written a book. And he's like, listen, I want to forget that. I want to forget what I saw. That's how freaked out he was. So there's that story. Also a true story. Now, I saved the best for last, ladies and gentlemen. And the reason why I'm saving the best for last is because this story is got to be the freakiest thing I've ever experienced in my life, and it had to do with the death of my grandmother. My grandmother died about 20 years ago. And there were incidents that were happening. She was always very powerful. I always felt like she was a very powerful person, spiritual, whatever else, right? But there's something funky going on with her. I remember even after she passed away, I used to have these dreams, and they were very lucid dreams where I was not really dreaming. I felt like it was just like real life. And I'd be in a room with her, all white walls and a rocking chair in the middle of the room. And there she was sitting on the rocking chair wearing all black, but not speaking, just rocking back and forth on the chair. And I'd be kneeling in front of her with my head on her lap crying, and she'd just have her hand on me. It's really freaky shit. So that I used to have dreams like that about her, right? When she died, my father and my aunt, of course, her children, were in her house, just the two of them, cleaning out the house, right? Going through her belongings, trying to figure out, who's going to take what and this and that or whatever, right? And my dad and my aunt both said, he goes, yeah, I was standing right by the front door and the front doorbell rang. So I opened the front door. I was right there and there was literally nobody there. At the same time, the side door bell rang. And then my aunt is like, should I go check that? Maybe they walked around the side because they maybe they figured nobody answered the front door fast enough or something. I don't know. So she went to go check over the side. And guess what? Nobody there. So my dad stood at the front door with the door open, and my aunt stood at the side of the house with the door open, and the doorbell kept ringing back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. They were also not connected electronically. There was none of that in those days. And that was the day after she passed away. So now I want to fast forward a number of years. This is probably the scariest story I've ever heard. Never mind the fact that it was like part of my family. My brother, my youngest brother, he's a musician. He's a professional musician. But when he was younger, he went to Italy and as part of this like exchange program, like international students. This is when he was getting his master's degree in or his doctorate in music. And he traveled to Italy and he was with a bunch of international students that he's never met before. None. He's never met any of these people. They were from all over the world. Germany, England, France, Spain, Canada, United States, Brazil, Australia. They were from all over the world, and they converged in this one spot, and they all stayed in the same hotel, right? That was part of the deal. Lady Gamer, I'm going to get to your comments in a moment. While I'm telling you guys a stories, put your stories in the chat. I'm going to read them out later. So this is what happens. So my brother's in Italy with all these people, right? And at night, they would gather like, 6, 7, 8 of them, 10 of them, whatever it was. And they'd gather in each other's rooms after the bars closed. Because in Italy, outside of like the main cities where they have nightclubs and stuff like that, a lot of the bars and stuff closed down pretty early. So they would just grab a couple of bottles or whatever. And they'd go back to the hotel rooms and they'd party all night, drinking and this and that and hanging out and all that kind of jazz, like fun stuff, right? So my brother's talking to this guy. They're sitting in like one end of this like hotel room or whatever, and a bunch of them on the other side pulled out a Ouija board, right? My brother's like, they're like, you want to do this? And my brother's like, no, you guys do it or whatever. And he doesn't believe in any of that shit. None of it. He believes in none of it. My brother's one of those guys. He doesn't believe in religion, doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in ghosts, doesn't believe in any of that shit. Okay? Nothing. He is one of those guys. You know what I mean? Like a no-nonsense sort of, listen, it's all just fairy tales and this and that. None of this stuff exists. So he goes, no, you guys do whatever. I'm just going to hang out over here. So anyways, they're doing the Ouija board. My brother's 15 feet away. These are complete strangers from different countries. These are not people that he knows or know anything about him. In fact, my brother said that most of them didn't even know his last name. So they knew nothing about each other, really, just on a first name basis, so to speak, right? So get this. The people doing the Ouija board said, Andrew, it's my brother's name. Like, someone is here for you. That's what the Ouija board says. My brother was not touching the goddamn board. He was on the other end of the room with a bottle of limoncello and a glass. If you don't know what limoncello is, by the way, it's an Italian liqueur made out of lemons. God, it's so good. It's so good. Nice, that bird. So here's the thing. He's 15 feet away. So my brother goes, oh yeah, someone's there for me? Who is it? And so, minutes pass as they're farting around with this Ouija board, right? And then they're like, it says it's your grandmother. My brother, again, half drunk, laughing, 15 feet away. He goes, oh yeah? Okay, smartass. What's her name? And of course, they don't even know my brother's last name, let alone, like I said, these aren't people like he hangs out with. He didn't even meet them until like a day before. These are, like I said, people all over the world, different countries. And he said, oh yeah, okay, well ask it what's its name. Minutes pass again. And then Andrew says, they say to him, they're like, Andrew, the board spelled out Elvira. My brother's blood froze in his veins. My grandmother's name is Elvira. How in God's name did that happen? Not only that, it gets scarier. Oh, El Nini, absolutely. Do not mess with Ouija boards and do not do them in your home. Do not do them where you live. You will invite something that you don't want. And it may not be a good thing. And now I'm going to get to the end of the story here. So my brother's now freaked out. And now he said, like, he goes, like, my blood, it's like my heart stopped. And he's like, how in the hell could that even have happened? Like, there's not even like a possibility in a million years of all names for them to pull out of a hat. The name Elvira is not a very common name, but that is my grandmother's name. So my brother asked another question, because now he's like, okay, you've got my attention. He says, what's her address? Where was she when she passed away? At this point now, it's like several minutes. He said about 4 or 5 minutes. And they spelled out her address. 24 Maryland Crescent, Richmond Hill, Ontario, Canada. They did not say Richmond Hill, Ontario, Canada. I'm just telling you where that was. They spelled out 24 Maryland Crescent. My brother was so scared, he was in tears. This is a man who doesn't believe in God. This is a man who doesn't believe in ghosts. This is a man who barely, I'm not even sure he believes in an afterlife, nothing like that. And he says it was the scariest thing he's ever experienced in his entire life. How insane is that story? And this did not happen on Canadian soil. This happened in a completely separate country with people from other countries who he's never met before. He never put his hand on that damn board. He was 15 feet away from it, sitting on a chair. That's a true story. And he said to this day he can't explain how the hell, not only did it ask for him, it spelled out her name, whom nobody knew but him, and even gave her bloody address. Tell me that's not one of the freakiest things you've ever heard of. My brother, the odds of you ever meeting my brother are pretty much nil. But anybody who does, you ask him that story and he will tell you straight to your face, this ain't no bullshit. He's like, that thing was real. That was real. It was a real story. And he's like, I don't believe in any of this stuff, but I know one thing. That happened. And that was real. Now, I've got some thoughts about that. Oh, Sabina Finest, you walked into me telling personal ghost stories, and these are true. These are true stories that have happened to me. And I figure Halloween, this is what we're doing. I'm not doing like a 2-hour show or nothing like that. We're just having we're having story time with MAGG. I figure I got the voice for it. So now something other interesting happened. Sabina Finest, you're going to have to rewind and go back and listen to the other stories. Yeah, you want to hear a real scary story, Alex? I bought Arc Raiders last night. Thank you to Seth Monster for buying that for me, by the way. Lady Gamer, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Ouija boards should never be touched at all because you don't know what you will get. That is the interesting thing. And now the thing that I've looked into after he told me that story, I started researching all that stuff. And it says, a lot of the times it may actually not be a loved one. It actually may be a demon or something else, some kind of an entity, something from another realm, dimension, God knows what, masquerading as someone you know, because by doing so, you open up yourself to weakness. And you open yourself up to weakness because you think it's your grandma, you think it's your mom, you think it's your dad, you think it's your grandpa. And by doing so, you let your guard down. And the minute you let your guard down, that's when they get you. And that's why you can't trust who you're speaking to. And I think that at that point, if you are in contact with somebody who you think is a loved one, the best thing to do is ask them a question only you and that person would ever know. If they can't answer that question, you're dealing with a demon. And demons exist, folks. I had 2 visit my home, as I told you earlier in the show. And that's the kind of thing that you got to be very careful about. Now, do you believe all this stuff? I don't know. Do you want to believe all this stuff? I also don't know. I can't speak for you. But I can tell you one thing. You cannot deny that there's something very strange goes on in this world. If you open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to it, there is more going on out there than you'll ever know. But you gotta be receptive to it. And when you're receptive to it, you will find there's so much more behind the veil than you ever realized. El Nini, Phil Spencer obviously uses a Ouija board. He obviously uses a Ouija board because what he does is that he actually conjures demons in order to come up with Xbox's financial scheme, right? So Sabina Finest, there you go. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. He says, whoever masquerades as a passed away loved one to try and deceive you is the purest form of evil. It's funny that you use the word deceive, because the desolate one himself, as they call him, Lucifer, fallen angel, he's also known as the great deceiver, right? May not be him. He's probably busy. He's probably got a lot of shit going on. You know. He's probably got a pretty... I mean, I can't even get I can't even get like a live stream of a game going sometimes because I got so much to do. Imagine the devil. Jeez. Imagine how much work that guy's got. The paperwork must be to the ceiling. But it could be one of his minions or many other demons, different dimensions, different dimensional creatures. We don't know. Absolutely, Ion Storm. K-Rock, you walked into the strangest podcast you're ever going to walk into your entire life. Ion Storm says, I believe some things can't be explained by science. No, they cannot. They cannot. Can you tell me what science could explain the stories I've told you guys tonight? What science could explain that Ouija board incident? What science could explain a girl's body lifting off a bed? What science can explain different people having the same dreams? Me experiencing what I experienced and everything else. Tarot Skull. You got a great name for Halloween, by the way. Sony is never doing day one. But they did bring Spider-Man to PC. In that respect, you're correct. But they brought it to PC. But day one, no. That's not an Insomniac decision. That is a Sony decision. It's funny how that all of a sudden turned into that. However, we're going to keep it on the theme of Halloween here. I just want to bid everybody adieu because now I've got to get... Listen to that. Zeb Bird. A few years ago, near Halloween, I was eating dinner and a small ball that was lying on the counter came flying and hit me in the back hard enough that I turned around and no one was there. I used to work in a retirement business for a number of years. We shall see, Tarot Skull. We shall see. We'll return to this conversation. We will return to this conversation. In the retirement business that I was working in, a number of people obviously died in that building. Number of people. And there are 24-hour porters who work there. And those 24-hour porters who work there will, all of them refuse to go to the third floor. So I had to ask them, because these guys are there all night, right? They're there from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., right? And I said, what the hell goes on the third floor, dude? And they're like, well, we don't talk about the third floor. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't talk about the third floor? I'm like the second in charge of this entire building. Tell me what's going on. And they're like, listen, man, you just don't want to know about it. And I'm like, okay. So I spoke to one of the other porters and I said, dude, listen, man, Rob's not telling me about the third floor. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And his face went white. And he's like, we don't talk about the third floor. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Fight Club? You know, the first rule of third floor is we don't talk about third floor. And I'm like, what is it? So anyways, I got to the bottom of the story, and it's been happening for years. Dozens and dozens and dozens of people have passed away in that building. The third floor is so haunted that even the porters not only refuse to go up there unless there's an emergency, and when there's an emergency, they call EMS and police to come up there with them. That's how scared they are of going to the third floor. They said they have seen furniture move, lights turning on and off. They see reflections, and they walk around because in the hallways of the building, there's these big, gigantic framed pictures, like glass framed pictures. And they said they have literally seen people standing next to them, looking at them. Old people in nightgowns, whatever, and sitting there staring at them or walking through the pictures and things like that. They said they have seen some of the craziest shit. Yes, Alex, I do believe. They said they have seen some of the craziest shit you'll ever experience. Totally wild, eh? But either way, there it is. So, you know. Anyways, I have to now go to Halloween. My house is filling with people. It's getting dark. The decorations are up, the music is on, the candles are lit. Time to turn on some spooky movies, some great music, and we're going to have ourselves a great time. So I hope you guys enjoyed Magg's Halloween special tonight where I tell ghost stories. And we will do this again next year, folks. We will certainly do this again next year. But until then, I want to leave you with one last thought. That every time that you try to deny something, or whatever you don't believe, or what you think you saw, maybe sometimes you really did see it. Happy Halloween, everybody. Be safe. Have a great night. Stay magnificent. And we'll see you guys all tomorrow. Happy Halloween.